Welcome to Clear Conversations, Entrepreneurial Legacies with your host, John Sleeting, an executive partner for Clearwater Capital Partners. Join John and his guests on this exclusive journey behind the scenes of extraordinary entrepreneurial families. In this series, we will dive deep into the stories of John's guests, who generously unveil the paths they've walked, the challenges they've overcome, and the wisdom they've gained along the way. Throughout these conversations, we explore their achievements beyond mere recognition, disclosing the distinctive perspectives that have shaped their entrepreneurial journeys. We hope you enjoy.
Hello, and welcome to Clear Conversations, the Entrepreneurial Legacies series. I'm John Sleeting, your host, and today I'm joined by Melissa Whitaker. Melissa is the founder and CEO of MWI, Melissa Whitaker International. She leads and consults based on leadership and culture and wellness and sales training, stemming from her corporate career as an excellent sales individual herself and sales team leader, and how she approached the corporate life, but then set out on a venture in her own entrepreneurial journey, which included her writing of books, her capturing her successes, but also discussing the highs and the lows of an entrepreneurial journey. And what does this mean, not just in business, but what does this mean in family? And how you come alongside her own life experiences and how she's wired up to how she tries to impart wisdom on her own children and her two daughters. And what does it mean within her family so that there's a holistic approach to the way she lives this out. So it's not just about consulting. It's not just about sales. It's not just about a pitch in terms of steps that you need to go through, but how you actually live this out, how you integrate your life in the totality of what it means from your core belief system and the pillars that she builds her life around to how you execute to go out with ambition and persistence and resiliency to achieve what it is that you want to do in your life. So this is going to be a fantastic conversation. I'm so excited to get into this dialogue with Melissa. Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and have this conversation. You've got a fascinating story. You've written books that we are going to go through in a bit more detail. But as we get started, this concept of entrepreneurial legacy, as you think about legacy as a starting point, usually people think about it as an ending point. As a starting point in this conversation, how do you define legacy and what does that mean to you?
Great question. Well, for me, leaving a legacy, and for people who are looking to be entrepreneurial and wanting to leave a legacy, I would share with them to make sure they're just being very bold in their faith. If they have a faith in the Lord, for me, that's important to me. So I have I want to have bold faith with where God leads me, but also bold faith in your clients. Bold faith in yourself and the abilities that God's given you up to this point to do everything you can do to serve your clients the best, to be the best you can be. Have that bold faith. And with that, I also think too, from a legacy standpoint that comes right alongside that is resiliency. And what I find is that most people, when they start their entrepreneurial journey, they have no idea the highs and the lows that come with it. And we've all heard that from many entrepreneurs, like, don't give up, never give up, but at the core of it, when I look at that and think of it, to me, that's resiliency. Okay. And I talk to a lot of young entrepreneurs about being resilient, making sure they're willing to innovate and know that if there are some times that the rug gets pulled out, if you follow those processes, you'll have time for a comeback.
So building on a couple items.
Yeah.
Let's start with faith, belief. John Chapman, our founding partner and CEO, often says you have to suspend a disbelief. Mm-hmm. If you disbelieve or you believe that something can't happen on the negative side, you have to suspend that disbelief in order to believe that anything is achievable. And so when you think about faith, is it blind faith? Is it just suspending disbelief? Is it like, how do you believe and then turn that belief system into reality?
Wow, great question. I would say it's a couple steps in that though, because one, when you're talking about, kind of removing that disbelief, I'm a big believer in mindset. I teach about it. I believe in it. I live it. And what I mean by that is exactly what you're starting to talk about is what you believe, whatever you can believe and conceive, you can achieve. It's kind of a motto I have in life. And it's like, the thing is that you have to believe that you can first. You can visualize that it's possible, and then you go after it with gusto. But that comes from mindset. And so part of that is just that belief that you can, and also knowing that still belief, that faith still comes back to, do you also have something behind it? For me, that also comes in alignment with my faith in God. And so that comes together. And I believe that I've been given certain purposes and certain strengths and certain gifts in my life. And it's my job to also live that out and believe that as long as I'm doing everything I possibly can and know that it's possible and can visualize that God will align that to happen.
And so you mentioned you live this out. This is personal to you.
Yeah.
You also talk about teaching and coaching. Can you help listeners right out of the gate here get a bit more of an understanding of what is your business? Right. What is MWI?
Wonderful.
Right?
So I'm the CEO and founder of Melissa Whitaker International, otherwise known as MWI. And we help organizations increase their revenue and profits. And we do that specifically through sales, leadership, culture, and wellness. And so with that comes around training and coaching and consulting and helping people in these main buckets, so to say, to really escalate their business, to grow and scale at a faster pace than they would if they weren't having the guidance.
Okay.
That's our main area of specialty.
Well, in sales, because sales is a process, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's an aspect to the sales, and yet people have to be trained from a process. If you move to culture ends up being a topic that ends up being a bit more squishy, if you want to call that, right?
Sure.
So how do you take that topic and think about culture and culture in the workplace and how it's evolved pre-COVID, post-COVID?
Yeah.
How do we think about this topic of culture?
You know, it's funny though, because what I have found, especially this year, for some reason, as we go in and I start to do more of discovery questions with people, what I discover is that even if they want me to come in for sales first or leadership first, but I do a little bit of my due diligence, so to say, it comes down to that sometimes we need to work on the culture first, if you know what I mean. Because I have found that if you don't work on the culture, if people are not communicating well, if there's a toxic environment, things are destructive where people don't feel seen, heard, and understood. The problem with that is if we go in and coach and consult on these other categories, it can have some help. It can elevate some of their success, but nowhere near what it can do is if we address the culture first. So when we come in, we provide personalized assessments where it really teaches everyone in the workplace how they're wired. And then based on how they're wired, like what does that mean for how they communicate typically? And then also too, we teach them to observe other people around them, their internal colleagues, their clients, if they're client facing. And what happens is they can assess and understand where are they at in this metrics of the psychology of people.
Yeah.
And then we teach them how to be more effective communicators, because we find that most of the problems and challenges in people's cultures inside their environment is the fact that there's a lack of communication or there's a lot of tension between people because they're wired differently. But when people learn that and they implement it, then they don't have to have someone home for dinner, John. You know what I mean?
Right.
But they do have to respect them enough to speak to them in a respectful way that's respectful to them based on how they're wired. And when that happens, wow, it's like a total change in their environment. They have synergy. Now people love to come to work. Well, now they're ready to take their skills to another level in other categories. But you can't forego the culture.
So if I hear you correctly, would you put culture then above leadership and sales training and tactics? So
I didn't in the past, but I would now.
And then where does wellness fit into that?
Great. Oh, that's such a great question. Well, it's funny because through COVID, because you had asked kind of pre-COVID, during COVID, what does this all look like? We really didn't have aspirations early on. I mean, I've been in business for 14 and a half years, coming up on 15 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And wellness was something that was just more personal to me. It wasn't something we were looking to offer as a service to our clients. It was more that I've been an athlete my whole life. I have always wanted to be healthy and take care of myself and have energy and be vibrant in everything I'm doing. And I was just living that. But what happened is through COVID, we started reaching out to our clients just to make sure we were doing everything we could to help them through this unusual circumstance. And we said, look, we know we help you in sales. We know we help you in leadership. And we were already doing that kind of assessment work. We just didn't label it as culture at the time. Okay.
Yeah.
And, but we said to our clients, is there anything else we could be helping you with? And it was shocking to us. I wasn't anticipating it, but we had more people come back and say, well, Melissa, we noticed that as a CEO of your company, that you're very attentive to your health and wellness. And we noticed that even for me, I had gotten really serious with it during COVID to make sure I was being healthy and holistic and eating right and moving right and having good mindset. And I had lost a whole bunch of weight just from age, really. It wasn't that I was not eating great before, but I noticed that after you hit a certain age, especially as ladies, unfortunately, it just slowly you gain some weight and you're like, what happened? Mm-hmm. So they noticed that visual change in me. They noticed that I would talk about it just from a personal standpoint of how it's important. And so they said, Melissa, have you ever thought about adding on like a wellness division? And I was like, no. Right. At first I'm like, no, how does that go with sales and leadership? But they were so wise. Our clients were so wise. They said, Melissa, you've always had a holistic model on how you do sales and leadership and culture. It's all connected. My mantra in the coaching world is I always say to them, look, if you're happier at home, you're happier at work. And if you're happier at work, you're happier at home. They said, you've always said that. I said, that is true. They said, well, if then in that holistic model, doesn't wellness just plug right in? Because if you aren't healthy and feeling good and having energy, you can't do the other things that you teach us. And I'm like, that is a great point. So it was really by asking feedback from our clients. This is what we heard. And we listened. Yeah. We listened to our clients and said, what do you need? And they said during COVID, they said, Melissa, people feel isolated. People sat at home when they had to work from home and not in the office. And they were, snacking more often, gaining weight, starting to affect their mental health, their physical health. Could you add that as just an element, as an option? So now we run like health challenges. That's what we do.
But in any business, because you hit on something like communication. Yeah. And what that means for culture and the ability to communicate inside the organization. But listening to the marketplace, listening to the people that you are serving. It's not about going in and saying, here's the answer and let me go tell you everything. If you're not taking that in, I just feel so blessed with the families that I get to serve. And I learn from all of them in terms of how they're thinking about their families and their strategies and the subsequent generations and how they're approaching their businesses. And taking that in as we evolve Clearwater Capital to turn around and make sure we're expanding the right services for the right people and how we're delivering that. But this listening component, how much do you believe, or how would you rate general business on how well they listen to the people that they're supposed to be serving?
Well, I think that people are pretending like they're listening, but they're not actively listening. And I think the problem with that, though, is there's a disconnect. And then people aren't totally present. They're thinking about, well, what am I going to say next? Or what's going on? Or I'm too busy with my things right now. And someone's sharing something with them and they're just like half listening. The problem is in the workplace and in life, that's destructive, right? And so we really want people to care enough. And that's it. Just start at the caring level to care about other people that they work with, care about their families. And when that happens, there is a dynamics that bonds people. Yeah. And not only does it bond people, but you can actually support each other. And when people feel supported in the workplace by their colleagues, there's study after study that says some people find their best friends in the workplace. If people don't find friends in the workplace, they may not stay there long. There's something to this concept of actively listening, actively caring, and actively supporting our colleagues and then, of course, our clients. And I think when that part is missing, people feel it. Yeah. It's very transactional in all ways and shapes and forms, and people don't feel seen. Yeah. And then it does break things down.
And if you're not listening, you're missing opportunities to actually deliver something back that the clients, the customers that you're serving are asking you to do and willing to pay you for. Right. If you actively listen. Right. So there's culture in the workplace, there's wellness, which bridges between the workplace. What about culture in the family and what happens in the household that you're actually bringing to the workplace? Because when everybody walks in the door of the workplace, figuratively or hybrid or whatever that might look like for someone, you're bringing your whole self to what that is. So what is culture in the home front look like? How do you cultivate that to have a healthy culture in the office?
Well, and it's so funny because we just finished doing a large global like customer service class, okay? And people were there from Mexico and Texas. And I love to see people's faces light up because it goes into this area. When we're doing an assessment, okay, that's any of the buckets we're talking about, customer service goes into that whole culture piece. We talk about unpacking these results of the assessments of how someone's wired and how to observe other people, and then to understand why there's conflict, and then how to remove that conflict, communicate more effectively. And I always connect the dots to family. And I say, listen, yes, we're talking now in a business sense. I want you to think of your colleagues first. Then I want you to think of how you relate to your clients. Let's not forget your family. Yeah. I said, because the thing is, if there's tension in the home, as much as you want to leave that outside of these walls, it affects you, yes? And everyone's like, yes, yes. Right. And so I said, you can apply these same things at home to your spouse, your partner, your children. You can understand them better. You can look at a situation, instead of being hurt by something someone said and taking it personal, stop and take a deep breath. Look at how they're wired. Is it possible they don't know what they don't know? Is it possible they're just being themselves and they don't realize that can be offensive to people wired differently? Right. I said, when we take a deep breath and look at that, we can then respond as it's a situation and it's not a personal situation. Right. You know, so
I'm feeling like this is a personal coaching session for me right now.
Right. Okay, good.
Keep going.
I will tell you, when we break that down, John, people are like, whoa.
Yeah.
And then I said, when we go over at the very end of the assessments, there's like kind of, I call it a cheat sheet guide. You know, I said, put this in your wallet, put this in your purse. If you have a purse, hang it in your cubicle in the workplace. And it literally just shows the 4 different quadrants that people typically, their personalities show up in predominantly. Yeah. And it tells them, like, what are they motivated by? What triggers fear in them? What are their priorities? Yeah. What are their limitations? And it's just a quick, short guide. So no matter what you're doing, you can glance at it and go, oh, maybe that's why they got defensive.
Yeah.
Why are they acting weird? And I just said this one thing, and boy, I did not anticipate that reaction. Right. I said, when you get that, check the guide and check it until it becomes second nature to you, where you're like, oh, when someone gets defensive, workplace, home, anything, clients, it's probably because you said something, either the words or the tone, that triggered fear in them for some reason, and they may not even realize it. And so I think when we bring that to home and we cultivate that to say, do this at home so you can have better relationships, because at the core of it, we care about the people we work with, we care about their families, and we of course care about the company they work for who hired us. But we feel that's very different in the workplace, because a lot of other trainers and coaches that, let's say, we compete against, I feel like they're more traditional. You know, they come in, they do the job, and of course they're nice and caring and they care about the people overall. Mm-hmm. And then they just leave though, right? Mm-hmm. The difference I feel like we bring to the table though is it is more of that holistic core value we have of like caring at a whole different level and bringing it to that level of caring about them and their family and the business, and not just the business.
You know, I've discussed previously my dislike for the concept of work-life balance.
Right. Yes.
Because in balance, right, the visual is the individual running around spinning plates on the top of, you know, sticks and poles, and it's like things are going to fall and break if you're just trying to balance. Right. Versus a different concept, which is integration. Mm-hmm. But integration has to be whole life. It's the totality of one's belief system, their home life, their work, the people they're serving, how they're wired up, they're working to their strengths. They're not just working for a paycheck. It may sound like utopia, but I think it's aspirational in terms of how do you integrate these items versus just trying to have a balance. Because if you're trying to just have a balance, I think you set yourself up potentially for a plate or two dropping and breaking in the process. And then which plate are you going to let drop first? Maybe you should take some plates down, right? To have a better integration regarding how you approach whatever it is that you're doing. You mentioned being wired up and how you're wired up. Let's rewind a few years, right? To you being a young girl at home, and some of the stories you've shared to go back. How are you wired up that you've discovered about yourself over time? Because it started at a young age for you.
It did. It did. And I kind of chuckle because I'm one of 4 children. Okay. I've got 3 siblings. I've got twin identical older sisters. I'm the middle runt, and I've got a younger brother. Okay. And I say that because I feel it's comical as I've kind of gone through my life to look back at not only our family, but other families, and how strange it is to me to this day that you have these siblings from the same family and they're so wildly different, right? You're like, how did this happen? We're very different. So it's funny that you asked that. When I was very young, for whatever reason, I'm just wired in a way where I'm driven and I want to go after anything that I would like to have in my life within reason. I know that I can accomplish it if I just go after it, figure it out, and work hard. I don't know that was necessarily taught to me per se. However, I will say that my father always showed a very strong work ethic. He always showed a strong work ethic. And that definitely, I think that side of that came from him for sure. But it's interesting because when I was really young, some people will say to me, well, when did you start selling? Or when did you, because back then I wouldn't have called it entrepreneurialism, even though we do today, even with kids, right? But back then they said, when did you start selling? And I said, I started when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And I go, don't you remember? Didn't you do this? I sold like Christmas wrapping paper and cards to the people at my church.
Yeah.
But it was funny because for that, it was point system based. So we had this catalog and we had to pick out a prize. And then you had to sell enough of their wrapping paper and cards to win, to earn enough points that your item, your gift would equal. That's how you got the gift, right? And so I look back and I said, oh, that's interesting. I don't even remember how I did that, but I just wanted to do it. And then I remember I did that every year, 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old. And then when I hit 10, I thought, this is it. It's the pinnacle. I'm going to pick the biggest, baddest beast in the catalog. And I'm going to sell my heart out. I'm going to help everybody. And I'm going to get this one prize to prove to myself I could do it. And it is funny. And I look back because my older sisters are not wired like that at all. My younger brother, not wired like that at all. And frankly, my mom and dad aren't even wired like that. So they weren't even sure what to think about this.
Yeah, where's this coming from?
Right. So it is interesting that some of that early stages that I just went after things kind of with gusto from an early stage of my life.
And so what did you learn about yourself though, as 7, 8, 9, 10 years old?
Yeah.
What did you learn about yourself that was what the motivation was? Was it the big gift? Was it you sold more at 9 years old than you did at 8 years old?
Yeah.
Was there it was internal competition more than it was against the other children? I mean, what were you learning about yourself?
That's a good question. Okay, I would say it definitely was a competition against myself just to see if I could do more each year. But I think part of it stemmed from, to be honest with you, if I look back, it's because I've always had a loving family, but we never had a lot of resources. And so for whatever reason, even at a very young age, I'm like, I want to be more, I want to do more, I want to help more. And it just was kind of innate. And so I think part of that comes from that, where my parents were, again, wonderful. They did a great job. They worked hard, but there was also 4 of us kids. So there's a lot of times where I wanted to have something fun. I wanted to have a toy. I wanted to have something fun. And at the time, my parents were like, no, we can't afford more things right now. So if you want something else, you're going to have to figure out how to do that. And I was like, what? But I did.
So if I recall correctly, around 10, 11 years old, at one point, you wanted something and your dad said, go get a job.
Yeah, this was comical.
So fill in the blanks.
It was comical for many reasons, but at the time I thought it was a no-brainer, right? I said to my dad, when I was 10 and I earned that biggest prize, it was this inner tube trampoline. So it's back in the day when they'd blow up the center tube and there was this really thick material on top with straps around it. So it made it that version of a trampoline. I was so proud of this thing, John. I came home from school every day and I just jumped on that trampoline. To the point where, what do we think happened? The inner tube popped. And I went to my dad and I said, Dad, I worked so hard for this. I need you to take me to Farm and Fleet back then, because I grew up in Woodstock. And I said, I need you to take me to Farm and Fleet and buy a new inner tube. And my dad said, I can't afford that. And of course, as a kid, I'm thinking, how much is this inner tube? My dad can't afford the inner tube. And he said, you're going to just have to get a job, Melissa. You're gonna have to get a job if you want to replace the inner
You're
tube.
10 years old.
I'm 10 years old. And I look back, I guess I chuckle because I see kids today throwing these tantrums, like because they want this or they want that. I don't know what was inside of me back then. I didn't even think about that. I just took my dad's, request, let's say. I took it as a challenge. I thought, I got to go get a job. Let's figure this out. So I just happened to live 2 blocks away from the local newspaper back then, when they had newspapers all the time. And I don't know what made me think of this. I just walked over there on my own because back then when you were 10 in the small town I lived in, it wasn't unusual that you could go out around town and just be back at dinner. I walked 2 blocks up and I walk into this newspaper place. I have no idea what I'm doing. But I walk in with this unusual confidence. And I said to the lady, she's sitting at the front desk, and back then you could smoke.
10 years old.
10 years old. And back then you could smoke in the workplace, So I just remember vividly, she was like, kid, what do you want? And I was so little, John, that my chin was at her desk. That's how little I was as a 10-year-old. And I said, well, I need a job. And she said, what? I said, I need a job. I need a job. Can I deliver newspapers? And she's like, She goes, do your parents know you're here? And it kind of takes me back to Home Alone, the movie Home Alone. Because of course he was like, of course my parents know where I'm at. And I said, yeah, I'm like, lady, I'm 10. Of course my parents know.
Of course they know.
Of course they know where I'm at. Well, they had no idea where I was at, right? So I don't know what made me, I look back at that and I really laugh because I wanted to feel more important than I was. I wanted to feel like I knew more than I did to impress them somehow. So the lady's like, well, okay, you want to tour the facility? And I said, yes, I do. I'm 10. I have no idea. So she's walking me through the facility and I'm like,
yeah.
How you doing? How you doing? I'm like, well, just waving. I have no idea who these people are, but I'm just waving at everybody. And then she takes me back to the printing press and she's showing me, the machine that makes the newspapers. And I'm like, I like what you're doing with this. I have no idea what I'm talking about. So I go through it. Anyway, she says, okay, here's the application. You got to fill it out. Your parents have to sign it if you want to sell newspapers. So I go home and somehow by the grace of God, honestly, I look at when my girls were 10 and I'm thinking, I don't know how I did that because they would have not been able to do that. I don't think, but I filled the whole application in, John. I figured it out. I sit at the dinner. We're all sitting down for dinner, our whole family. And I slide the application to my father and I say, I need you to sign that. He's like, what is this? He's like, I said, I got a job. He's like, what? He was so happy. My mom spits her soup out. She's saying it the other day, what? What do you mean she got a job? She's only 10. I said, I got a job, Mom. Dad said I needed to get a job to get a new inner tube. I got a job. And my dad's like, yes. So he's like signing right away. My mom's like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Needless to say, it was a great experience, to be honest. And it taught me, even at an early age, how to just be determined, how to not let obstacles stop me from something that was important to me, and to persevere through things that were uncomfortable. Because frankly, back then, most of the newspaper people were junior high boys. And I was like 5th grade, 10 years old, little girl, really tiny, smallest one in my class. And so they had to tie the newspaper bag up. Otherwise it was on the ground. That's like how little I was. And so I remember walking the very first time getting trained, and my mom came with me to make sure I was safe. And there was a junior high boy training me for this route. And he kind of looked at me and looked at my mom and he said, are you sure you want to do this now or do you want to wait till you're a little older? And I'm like, listen, get to it. We're doing this now. And my mom's like, just let's go. She's determined we're going to go. But you know what? I will tell you though, John, what an amazing feeling I had of accomplishment.
Right.
When I went and collected the money for the first time after starting my route, where do you think the first place I went? I went and bought the inner tube.
Yeah.
I said to my dad, I've got the money. I have no idea how much this is. Do I have enough money for an inner tube? He's like, I think we could work it out. So he takes me to the store. He shows me what we need to get, and I pay for it myself. Yeah. And that kind of was enlightening to me because I thought anything's possible.
Yeah.
If I want something, I just have to work for it. I have to be responsible, and then I can do it.
And that builds your character. It builds the resiliency. You talked about resilience earlier, your confidence. And so when we work with families on this concept of wealth, right? And individuals that, could buy the inner tubes, could buy the inner tube companies at that matter. If their kids come to them and say, because everyone right has this shared, we don't want the wealth to ruin our children. And in your story, and that's why I wanted you to share your story, because then there's so many lessons to be learned in there. If the resources were just handed to you to say, here, I'm going to go buy you the inner tube, what do you believe you would have missed out on, and how would that possibly have affected your trajectory? Because I believe that there is nature and nurture in this. There's how you're wired up, as you talked about, and that's the nature piece. But then the nurture piece is going, I'm not solving your problem for you. I'm not buying that inner tube for you. You need to go figure this out. I don't care if you're 10 years old or not. Go figure that out. So how do individuals do this with the wealth that they've created, the opportunity to go off and buy the solving of problems, especially for the next generation, versus the next generation figuring it out for themselves and having those challenges in life too?
I love that you asked that question, because let's face it, when we're kids, we don't understand, and maybe we just get upset. Maybe we get a little resentful. We're like, well, the other kids' parents are buying them stuff. Why aren't you just getting it for me? But I also understood that my parents didn't really have some of the resources. So I knew it wasn't to be mean to me. I knew that at a young age. But of course, you're like, wow, I really have to work hard for this. I think the benefit, I feel like looking back, and what I've tried to make sure we're doing with our own children now, is we did the same thing with our kids when they were very young, but we just made sure we were talking to them about the lessons. And I think that if my father, even back then, had just bought it for me, number one, I wouldn't have learned the value of money. I wouldn't have appreciated it as much as I did, because I had to work for it, and I had to see how much work I had to do. Sometimes how little money you get,
yeah,
and then how far it goes. And then you have to start being selective. You really do understand. I know we always hear that joke, money doesn't grow on trees, right? From old parents back, in different times. I don't think you fully understand that as a child until you really know that it is not unlimited. But you don't know that until you have to earn some of it. I think when your parents just buy you things when you need it all the time, and of course necessities, all the normal things, yes. But when they don't see what comes behind that to make that, they really truly have no idea. And it's not their fault. We're not teaching them that. Right. They are then limited to know how are they going to prepare themselves for responsibility and strong work ethic, and know how you can stretch your money, how you can build your money, how you can be responsible with your money. So it's funny, I look back, and as much as I was like, I can't believe I have to buy this, I was so proud of myself for doing it. And my dad, who was kind of not really even understanding the whole thing as well, he knew what he was doing, that he just really didn't have some of the resources. But then he looked and he said, this is a good thing. Yeah. She's learning some good things. Right. And she's learning that now make sure you're also taking really great care of that inner tube trampoline, because look how hard you work to get it. Right. And so I just think that's interesting for our own children today. And I agree with you that when I was younger, I said to my husband, I want to have a different kind of life for us. I want to have a different kind of life for our children one day than I grew up with in regards to wealth. And I say that only is because I know there's a fine line, though. I said, I want to be able to provide more experiences for our girls. I want to travel more. I want them to see other cultures and other foods. But I don't want them to be spoiled to the fact that they think that it's unlimited, that it doesn't come with hard work and effort, and that they can just be frivolous, I guess, Yeah. And so we've had to be very strategic, sometimes doing a good job. I think sometimes having to adjust. But when our girls were very little, we started just doing exercises with them, just learn the value of money. And when they saw how hard they worked for what they actually received, and we'd go to the store, and of course I would tell them, hey, look, we're your parents, of course. We're going to buy your necessities. Of course, we take care of your clothes and your food and your shelter. And we give you fun things too. But the fun things have a limit. So if we feel like you want more things and you don't really need more things, but you really want it, this is where you step in and you can earn it and you can get it yourself. Yeah. And then it was watching their face, John, shift from going to the store and they had only so much in their envelope. And they wanted to buy more things than was in their envelope. They said, well, can't you just get the rest? Nope, that's not how this works. What's in your envelope?
Right.
Now you have to choose. What is more important to you? But to see their light shift of wanting it all to saying, I don't need this right now.
Right.
This is more important to me than this. And having to prioritize what they could afford and what they wanted. Honestly, that taught me a lot as an adult.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, they're getting it.
Right. We should all be taking that mindset. Now, our purpose statement gets in, we want our clients to live with joy, confidence, and a spirit of abundance. But if money doesn't grow on trees, and we're in the wealth management business, and you speak of scarcity, that it doesn't grow on trees, that it's not unlimited, that we all, no matter what level of wealth, have to prioritize what it is that we're doing, we're choosing to spend the money on. How do you live a life of abundance when resources can be scarce? And again, there's a relative humanism part of that, right? That comes in terms of this mindset of comparison and how that destroys gratitude. But that's a separate conversation into itself. But the realization that there is scarcity, and yet we want individuals to live with a spirit of abundance. What is the spirit of abundance to you?
I love that, because for me, it's a fine line, because I am someone who dreams really big. I don't feel I have any limits. And we do talk about that whole even abundance mindset in our family, even though we're teaching those lessons. Because I think fundamentally, they need to learn the fundamentals first, so that they are not just not knowing at all any knowledge or any experience. But we're mirroring that with the dreaming side. And I say that from an abundance standpoint of saying, now, if you make wise choices, anything is possible. If you want something in your life, you can just set a goal. You can see what people you need to bring into your life for learning, what education you might need to bring into your life about learning, what circles do you need to hang in or whatever. So there is no limit on that side. Yes, you only have this, and you can do this today. But I want you to dream, and I want you to say, what do you want? And then you just have to start going after it and scheduling it and timing it and working towards it and leveraging your funds in that's a whole nother conversation, but leveraging funds with calculated risks that are smart and well thought out, and just not erratic or irresponsible. I think there's just that fine line there of saying, okay, understand the core, but dream big. No, there are no limits, but there's a plan and a process you can implement to accomplish anything or have anything in your life that you would like from an abundance standpoint.
Yeah. We look at the management of the scarce resources. That's a really important stewardship role. How do you manage that well? Because it is scarce. It's not just you. People work really hard for what they're creating, what they're building, to go off and do what it is they want to do with their family and with charities that are important to them. And how do you minimize the tax squeeze, which is an ongoing challenge, to bring those resources back. So that has to be done really well. But then, and there was a book we shared with a lot of client families, is probably 10, 12, 15 years ago now, called Beyond Wealth. And Beyond Wealth gets to, what does it mean to live a rich life? Because a rich life is not about the net worth statement. A rich life, and the book just goes through different stories. When is the last time you went for a walk and looking at the sunset? When was the last time you sat down and had a good glass of wine and listened to some jazz? When was the last time you do whatever? Just go through this list of things, because all of those items, yes, you need to pay for a trip, or you need to pay for the music or whatever it might be. You're still paying for, but there's aspects of it. It's about the relationships and that spirit of abundance and the relationships and the people you're coming in contact with and the people that you're affecting. That's a rich life. And yes, the money can help, right, in terms of the tools that are there to do that. But you can also turn around then and empower other individuals. And you have one more story, if I could, you could share, not me. You could share from you and your daughters, Central America, if I recall correctly. That are those moments of how you're teaching the next generation some of the lessons you learned at an early age.
Sure. Well, and it's interesting that you bring that up as we talk about this quick story when we went to visit Costa Rica on a vacation. And it ties it into, by the way, what we promote even for my organization, we promote that concept, what we call legacy wealth. And it's interesting that you bring up that definition, because for us, when people say, oh, what do you mean with legacy wealth, Melissa? We are not wealth advisors like you guys are. We don't profess to be, nor do we want to be. But when we want to encourage people is to have that integration that you talk about, but the difference of, yes, you can have your financial goals and making sure that you have multiple streams of revenue and income if you're a business and or a family in general. But we want to make sure you do have that integration piece, that you are prioritizing important people in your life, like your family, and going for a walk, having that glass of wine, or listening to Frank Sinatra, which is my choice. And the last one is the give part. And the give part is kind of what goes into this Costa Rica story. And we're big believers that, where does your heart break? Look as an individual, as in with our clients, with our family, with our friends, at the core of it, where does your heart break? What breaks your heart? And for me, it has always been around women and children. And so we made sure, even for my organization, we've aligned with other charities and organizations that support women who can learn how to be entrepreneurial and can support their families. And we've come alongside other orphanages with children and taking care of the children. And then also making sure we're also now currently supporting an organization that's working at stopping human trafficking. And so we take that to be important, and we take that to the story of Costa Rica, because when our girls were really young, we took them there for a vacation. They were probably, I want to say, maybe 3 and 5 years old. Okay. And we went to a resort, and we made sure that not only were we staying on this resort for safety and fun, but we wanted to go out into the countryside. We wanted to go out into the community, and we wanted our girls to also see kind of how everybody is just living in that area. And that's a reality for some people. They live in little huts and they're happy.
Right.
They're happy, but they were like, what's happening there? They were young. And we took these little ATV tour out so we could kind of get around. And we talked to some locals, and we spoke with our girls, and we were just teaching them some lessons along the way of just how life can be for different places, different people. Well, while we're at the resort, there was a young lady there who helped all the children with kids activities. Now, our girls were a little too shy to kind of just go off with the kids, but she always every day came to the pool and just befriended them, talked to them, engaged with them, until by the end of the week, of course, they were warmed up. They wanted to do something, but we were getting ready to leave, right? But it was interesting to me because we started to get to know this young lady. She was in her 20s. And she spoke with us about how she was a mom. She was a single mom. She had a couple kids, and how her mother lived with them as well. She took care of her mother as well. And we started to just hear her story. And she shared with us how she would ride a bus a long way to get to the resort. She'd stay there all week. So her mother would take care of her kids, and she'd work all week, and she'd take a bus home on weekends. And how hard that was, but she was willing to do it to take care of her family. And so towards the end of the week, I felt like I just got kind of a prompting from God to look at my wallet that I had with me at the pool. And I felt like he just said, Melissa, take all the cash you have in there right now. Because of course, you're not taking everything you have for the vacation to the pool, but you have some with you. But the Lord said, take what you have in there. And I said, how much, God? $10, $20? No. He said, everything you have in that wallet. It was like $100 and some, okay, just for perspective. And he said, I want you to take everything that's in your wallet, and I just want you to subtly just place it in her hand and say, thank you for how amazing she's been this week for your kids and for you as a family. And you just felt that you wanted to bless her with something. That's it. Don't make it a big deal. Don't hold it out. Just fold it up, subtly put it in her hand, let her go on her way. And see, John, we don't know what's going on in people's lives. That's the core message there. And so not only is that the message that we don't know, but our kids are watching. And so she left that pool time. And later that night, we went to a dinner on the resort. And she came in as part of the entertainment, of course. And she had written us a letter in the most best English she could, because she didn't have it fluent, but she was good. It was You could read it. She wrote us this letter, and we're at dinner, and again, 3 and 5-year-old little girls. And she says, you have no idea, you and your family are my angel. You're my angel. And she just gave me this letter, and she went on because she had to do the entertainment. I open up the letter and I read it to the whole family, and I just start sobbing. And my girls are like, Mommy, what happened? I don't understand. And I said, well, we gave some money to, her name was Marilyn. We gave some money to Marilyn just as a thank you for being great with you girls and hearing her story and just whatever we can do to help her, to say thank you for working hard. And I said, and we read the letter. And in the letter, she says, Miss Melissa and family, what you don't know is earlier today, I was told that my electricity was going to be turned off in my home where my kids and my mother are. And I didn't have enough money, no matter how hard I was working, did not have enough money to pay the bill. And I just prayed this morning that God would send me an angel and how I'm going to pay my electricity bill. And she said, you and your family are that angel, because the money you gave me not only will pay my electrical bill, but there's extra to save for food and for future bills. And so I just sobbed, and my kids start crying. I start crying. My husband starts crying. And we looked at the girls and said, see, you don't know how you can be a blessing to others. But when the Lord asks you to do something, just do it, because you don't know what is going on the other side for them. And sometimes the Lord is just using us as a vessel to meet other people's needs. And that rocked them. They remember that to this day. As young as they were, they remember that to this day. And they know that's a core fundamental piece of our family unit, is to give and to be a blessing and to serve.
And that's the bringing together the nature and the nurture. Here's how you're wired up. Here's where your heart is. Here's where your head is and your mind and the business aspect. And then how you train up the next generation, right? How you develop, how you give those experiences to nurture in that perspective. And there's a lot of times, I mean, $100 or whatever the amount was, right? Changed that family's trajectory for a period of time, bought them some more time in terms of how they needed to get to the next electric bill. But how sometimes individuals, myself included, right? There's a lot of people, because of the nature of our work and the families that we're serving, that sometimes we lose context with how hard it is in the world, right? And whether to buy an inner tube, whether to keep an electric bill on. I was with family yesterday, and we were talking about just different monies that needed to be moved around. And during the conversation, there was comments like, well, we could just, let's shift that here. It's not that much money. And it was well into the six figures, right? And so it's like, and in the moment, the individual caught themselves like, when did that not become a lot of money, right? When did that not, because $100 can change somebody's life. And now we're sitting there going, okay. And so they caught themselves in the moment. And I got just great respect for this couple, the family, what they do, where their heart is. They didn't mean it in any flippant way. Because they're so generous in how they approach things. And yet we're all susceptible to that, right? We're all susceptible to be going, it's not that big of a deal. Somebody else will take care of it. But being responsive in that moment and how we engage the next generation regarding this stewardship challenge that's there, to say, okay, we all want a better life for our kids and for our grandkids and what they're doing in their experiences, without taking away the challenges and the hardships that develop them, that can only be on a firsthand basis, because you can't buy the experience of walking in to get your paper delivery job. You can't buy that. You've just got to experience it. And that's the difference. There are some things that money can't buy, and that's one of them right there. So when you take all of those items, you come in, we've talked a little bit about you're older with children, but your early on professional career was in sales and different sales. And we're going to move through this part really quickly. You realize all kinds of success in sales professionally, different organizations, but then you were looking to launch your own business. What year was that you launched your own business?
In 2010.
Okay, 2010. In 2011, you wrote a book, and I got a couple books here that you wrote, co-authored with Brian Tracy. The first one, Pushing to the Front, by Brian Tracy and Melissa Whitaker. And so I'm going to go through, because into these two books, I'm going to do a quick read through of a few items, then ask you to tease out just one area in specific, and we're going to go a little bit deeper. So this is from Pushing to the Front. You listed and said, what I found is that by implementing the following 11 key steps, extraordinary results are possible. So this is 2011. You founded your business 2010 after an already successful corporate sales career. So you're not making this up theoretical. It's what you experienced, lived out, and delivered in the marketplace. And these are the 11 key steps to extraordinary results as you laid out. Number 1, set goals. Number 2, be specific. Number 3, determine time frame. Number 4, measure progress. 5, make it achievable. 6, know the why. 7, put goals in writing. 8, have a plan. 9, positive attitude matters. 10, take action. 11, visualize the outcome. As I go through that list of 11, and all of them are important, right? You included them all for a reason, and there's each one of them is probably an hour into itself. If you were to take one of those 11 steps and say, here's really an area that an individual would have to pay attention to, especially earlier on in their entrepreneurial journey, their professional career, as they're looking at it, what would you highlight in?
You know, it's interesting in my early stages of my career where I was working for other organizations as well too. I look at that and say, people said, Melissa, how did you reach some unbelievable stages of your career and titles? And it was coming from these 11 core steps. And I found that number one, a lot of people had no clarity on what they even wanted, right? So that's where the set goals come from. But if I had to narrow it down to what I have found to be so critical in that list is the why. And the reason why I say that is because, yes, some people don't have goals and other people do. That is a fact. But what I find is that even when people do set the goals, which is like the small 2% of people who have clarity to set the goals and actually do the process, even if they set the goals, if they don't know what their why is to accomplish that goal, it's unlikely that they're going to achieve it, or at least at any speed. Okay. And so we really focus a lot on that when I'm doing training and coaching for sales and leaders, by the way, is we say, I want you to do an exercise around dreaming big, setting goals, having all these elements we talk about, but you can't finish the exercise without putting a why next to every goal you set. Because years ago, I heard something Tony Robbins said that really hit me hard. I've never forgotten. And he said, look, as human beings, we gravitate towards what gives us pleasure and we avoid what brings us pain. He said, the reason why we don't accomplish things in our life is because we set a goal, we start to do it, it gets hard. We focus too much on the pain of the process than the pleasure of the outcome, and we stop. But if your why is big enough, what happens is no matter how hard it becomes or how many roadblocks you hit, if your why is so big, you will only focus on the pleasure of the outcome and not the pain of the process. And therefore you will succeed. And I think that is a pivotal part that people are missing when they're doing this process.
So, and I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree with everything you said. But when I went through and read this the first time and I was reflecting on it, I looked at that, and that's kind of where my mind jumped to, is saying, well, you should start with the why. Simon Sinek has us all well trained, right? Start with your why. But I found it fascinating actually to have it listed right in the middle at number 6.
Right.
And the interesting thing to me, or at least what struck me as I reflected further upon it, is that a lot of us start with our goals. Here's the goals. Outline your goals. What is it you want to achieve, right? That the opportunity for the pleasure side of it, the reward that comes from there, starting there. But then backing into and having a gut check of what's your why in step number 6. Because if we do start with the why, we get very myopic, big picture, head in the clouds a little bit in terms of world peace, right? Solving world hunger, right? I mean, so we could be out there in terms of the why being almost too big. But if we take the goals, at least what I was learning when I was reflecting on it, whether you intended this or not, this is what I took away of going, outline the goals, applying the time bound, the measurable, the actionable, the relevant. I mean, really coming back through that, almost the SMART goal system that you reinforce
fundamentally
here.
The SMART and add things to it, right?
But then after you have that, still do a gut check. Why? Why are you doing all this? And do you find with your work with individuals, they don't pause on that piece? They work all through the SMART, but they never do the gut check of the why.
And it's interesting they say that, and it is in strategic actually where it's located, in my opinion. Okay, because that's funny, right?
Then it worked.
It worked because I had to think about how do I teach it in life. And that's the order that I shared it in, because I taught that at other organizations before I even started my own business, right? So when I had my own business and I was starting to write this co-author this book, I said, what were my steps? What is the order I actually did it in? And how was it impactful? And for me, and even to this day, now having in my business almost 14 and a half years, almost 15, I wouldn't change that. You know why? Because I want people to just dream and get clarity on like certain categories of their life of what they want professionally and personally. Just put it all out there, no limitations. But then I do want you, after you've done that, to have the gut check. Mainly because if the why isn't big enough, why is it on your list?
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
people don't stop for that. And I can tell you, when we do this exercise in our classes, I haven't found anyone else who's asking them that, which is shocking to me. But they'll say, oh, everyone sets goals and they have the SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time frame, all that fun stuff. Well, Melissa, no one's asking us why. I don't even know. I don't even know if I know why. And I'm like, I want you to sit with that. And you know what I say, which is really funny, is I'll say, now I give them some set of instructions after they do an exercise with us. I'll say, now I want you to put all your goals aside, even with your whys. I want you to put it aside for 24 hours, have a glass of wine, or whatever you want to do. Just kind of forget about it for 24 hours. Come back to it after 24 hours and reread what you wrote and see what you still feel compelled about and what you think needs to be moved off. Because the thing is, it's not to have an overwhelming amount of goals, but it had to have specific goals. And then we help them to prioritize their top 2 or 3, let's say, and then make sure the other ones are still there. But maybe they're looking at the other ones once a month, but they're looking at the top 2 or 3 every day, so that even subconsciously, their subconscious is working on their behalf, even when they're doing other things.
Yeah, because it's going to be challenging.
It's going to be challenging.
Taking 1 or 2 goals and tasks.
Yeah.
And someone once said, we all overestimate what we could do in 1 year, but we tend to underestimate what we could do over 5 years. If you're taking the long-term view, and you stay focused. Don't try to solve everything this year. But if you can get these 1 or 2 top goals done in this year, you're going to make the progress, because then over that 5-year period, you're going to have moved a whole lot of items forward that could be very strategic for your organization too. Mm-hmm. And not just the organization, I'd encourage, right, without overstepping, probably back into your family too. Yeah. When you think about what does the family stand for, what is the family values? Some people go as far as saying, here's our family constitution and what we believe and how we come together, because then they rally around that as a family, similar to what you shared about with generosity and giving. And here's who we are as a family to serve the young lady in Costa Rica and others, of what that is. That's a reflection of who you are and who you want to stand for as a family. Yeah. So having that why, and then if the why is there in your family and the why is there in your workplace, especially for the entrepreneur, the founding individuals, to come in, those things are back to integration. You're not trying to balance your why in the business versus my why is in conflict with my family and what I'm trying to do there. If they're integrated, you're gonna flourish in terms of whatever it is that you're setting out on. And so it sounds easy, right? And it sounds great. So you started in 2010, you wrote this book in 2011. And then everything was rainbows and butterflies, as they say, going forward. There was nothing hard about life for you. Is that a true statement or not?
No, right. Absolutely not. And if anyone is an entrepreneur, they know that's hysterical, right? But I was saying the shortest version of that, and to have some encouragement for others that are entrepreneurial or have their own businesses. The message I want to share with people about even my entrepreneurial journey, as I found, is number 1, we can't relate to others through ups and downs if we haven't been through it ourselves. Number 2, we want credibility to really help them, that God may take us through some rough roads and some rocky terrain and the valley, so to say, to learn some lessons to stretch us, to stretch our character, to stretch how well we handle stress, how well we can manage many things going on at the same time. There's things we have to grow and stretch in to elevate our own selves so that we can then elevate others around us. And so what I have learned is in my business, the first 5 years of my business, John, it was amazing. I will be honest, a little bit overwhelming, but we couldn't keep up. We had so much business. My prayer when I started the business was, because I was, as exciting as it sounded to start a business, I was terrified at the same time, because we were trying to pay the mortgage. We had a 2-year-old toddler, a baby on the way. My husband was just kind of working up his career at the time. So I was kind of the majority breadwinner at that time. So then I thought, oh my gosh, I have all this responsibility. Am I really going to start a business? Even though we did it for more flexibility for our family. So my prayer back then, and I just said, Lord, if you continually open up doors and contracts, I know that I'll do everything you've given me the ability to do up till this point. But if you continue to open up doors and contracts, I'll know that you're honoring this so that I can honor my family. And that's kind of where it started. Well, then the next 5 years, it was like, we were like roller skating through life. I mean, it was like more contracts, more business, adding on staff members. We almost couldn't keep up. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. Sometimes I'm like, okay, this is a lot. Okay, God, thank you. But it was a lot. But then something changed significantly, scared the pants off of me, which is why I was almost nervous to start the business to begin with. What about the unknowns? So what happened is in 5 years into the business, a staff member and myself went on a mission trip, ironically, to serve at an orphanage in Baja, Mexico. And it was such an amazing experience and blessing. But when we came back, at that time in our business, we had to make sure that we had at least 2 months of contracts in advance, booked and ready to go, to make sure we always had enough revenue coming in to make payroll, pay the operational expenses, all things that entrepreneurs just cringe at sometimes. And we were ready, right? We came back from this mission trip and we thought we're going to hit the ground running. We've been a blessing to this place, but they've really blessed us. And now we want to just really pour it into our clients. Right. Well, that whole week we came back from that mission trip, one by one, every client called with very different reasons. They all had either put their contracts on hold or they had to cancel their contracts for unforeseeable situations, all of them. And I said, what? And any entrepreneurs listening right now, I can tell you right now, they would be like, oh my gosh, either I've been there, that's frightening. It's terrifying. Yeah. It's terrifying if we're going to be honest about it. So I called my right-hand person, Tammy, and I said, Tammy, we've got to pray for some significant, big, brand new business like now. And she's very wise. She also has a strong faith. She said, I'm not going to pray for that. And I thought, what? And she said, I'm going to pray that God will give us clarity on why he cleared your deck. And I said, what do you mean? She said, are there things that we should be doing in our business and in MWI that we know we have to do to stay relevant, but we've never made the time because we're working too hard in the business and not on the business? And I said, well, yeah, there's tons of that stuff, right? We always have enough of that. She said, maybe it's time that we work on some of those things to stay relevant. And then we have to surrender that back to the Lord. And I was like, I don't know about you, John. I am not great about that. I like to be in control. I like to set my goals and I like to achieve them, as you can see. So the Lord had to kind of take me through some learning lessons. I'm going to be honest. And at that time, the rug was definitely pulled out from underneath us, if people can relate to that. And we had no idea how we were going to get through it. There were times I thought maybe we just need to close our doors. We had a great run for 5 years. Maybe that was all we were supposed to do. And every time we kind of took it to the Lord and said, Lord, is it time? Because my prayer back then was, if you keep opening up doors and contracts, I'll know you're honoring this to honor my family. But if you close the doors, I'll go back and get that corporate job, whatever I need to do to provide for my family. And I said, is this it? Should I close the door? And every time I heard, not yet, Melissa, you say you want this level of impact in the world. You're here and you say you want to be here. Do you trust me? Yeah. Because I'm going to have to take you through a drought. You'll have just enough business to get by. Not more than enough and not enough. And sometimes it won't come until the 9th inning, if you know what I mean. Yeah. But you will just get by while you learn these lessons. Do you trust me? And I'm like, yes, I trust you. Now, I had to question myself sometimes like, okay, do you really trust him, Melissa? Because you're panicking. Do you trust him? And so he took me through, honestly, a 1.5-year journey where I lost my mother, who was my best friend during that time. I lost our pet, our dog at home, who we had for 11 years, who was basically part of our family. So there was like devastation. Business is barely getting by. And I keep taking back to the Lord, like, why is this happening? Why are you doing this? And he had to remind me, I'm not doing this to you. I'm doing this for you. Do you trust me? Because we have to keep building your character, Melissa. We have to keep stretching you that you can handle more stress and more situations better than you're doing today. Because what it takes to handle this level of impact, you are not prepared for here. You're not prepared for what it takes. Are you willing to let me stretch you? That was a hard 1.5 years for us. Very hard. Many times I wanted to give up, if I'm going to be honest.
This is
2015 into 2016.
Okay. And so during this time, you also decided to write another book.
I did. Right? I did.
Because you didn't have enough going on.
I didn't have enough going on trying to hold on to my business and running and helping my family.
But the reflections in the book, with that context and what you just shared of what you were going through at this time, the second book, Beat the Curve, Health, Wealth, and Success. Beat the Curve, again, by you and Brian Tracy together. So similarly, there's 5 items that you highlight. And so the context that you just provided, here you step back and not so much about here's the next steps, right? Here's the process that you go through, the 11 items that we just read, the including the goals. These are more foundational. And as you and I had previously discussed, these are foundational items that, similar to your why being in that 6th slot of the list of 11, which is a great gut check. It's almost here's the process, right? Because everybody launches their business. There's always the more items to work on the business and in the business because you're just grinding it out on both sides of that equation. And then to step back and have more of these foundational type items. And here you say, when people ask me how I built a thriving business in such a short time, I tell them that the following 5 pillars are vital to anyone's success in business and in life. So not just business. This is the integration of business and life and how it comes together. And these are foundational when I read these items versus it being, just kind of actions. They have to be to the core of who you are to take the actions on the goals and the why. And maybe the why emanates from some of these. But pillar number 1 you have is have faith. Great context you just shared on that. Pillar number 2, anchor your mindset. Just share that. 3 is being authentic, just like you are now going, it isn't all sunshine and roses. It is hard. It's entrepreneurs out there can absolutely relate. And if somebody's considering doing or launching a business and launching an enterprise, you're going to prepare for it. It's kind of like in the financial markets. Is there going to be another correction? Of course there is. Is there going to be another bear market? Of course there is. It's just when, right? It's not about if. That's how cycles work, and it happens in your business life cycle too. But pillar 4, being determined, having that why be even greater so that you can be determined and take a risk on yourself. And so out of those 5, as we start winding down our time together and you think about these foundational type items with someone that is early on the journey, that's going to consider saying, yeah, you know what? Here's a problem I'm going to go solve. I have all my goals. I know my why. I have these launched. As you think about these foundational items, how important are these to realize the success, the world change that somebody wants to take place with whatever problem they're solving in their business venture?
I find it to be critical. I'm going to be honest. And the time that I've run my own business and then I do the best I can to empower others around me, especially entrepreneurs, especially if they're also starting out and they don't know. I will say it's critical. It's so critical that they have these 5 pillars and start to lean on them, understand them, and implement them. Because one of the talks I've been giving right now as a keynote speaker for different functions is around this area. And it's called resilience, innovation, and comebacks. And I share more of this story because I find that if we're not willing to be real and vulnerable, which I had to really work on, frankly, and share that there are highs and lows and that you're not alone. It's not just you. We all go through it, by the way, and it's not a reason to give up. If you have a calling on your life and you have a purpose, which we all do, and you're living out that calling and purpose, times will get tough, but you have to lean on your faith, which is, I feel like, one of the most core fundamental steps of the 5 steps. If you can't have faith and lean on faith, it's hard sometimes to get through those tough times. There are times where everybody wants to give up, but then we have to go back and say, hold on. Do I have faith that this is my calling and I am supposed to be doing this? I need to find creative, innovative ways. I need to be resilient and I need to be innovative so I can have comebacks. But why? Not just for me, not just for the business, but because we're doing our calling, our purpose to serve others. And if we're not doing this, who is doing this for them? We do have that calling, right? So it kind of also comes back to what you'd asked me early on too, just about legacy. And that's why I want my legacy to be, she had bold faith. That the times where she even doubted herself, she had to surrender it to the Lord. And she just had to have bold faith that she was following her calling. And it may not show up the way that I thought it would. It may not happen at the speed that I wish it would, because I'm impatient, if many other people can relate to that. But to have bold faith that every day we take one step forward, we live our calling and our purpose, and we have bold faith that we are doing what we should be doing. And when we do that, there's a ripple effect that some people we may never even meet, we may have an impact on. and may change significant things in the world.
Yeah.
And we may never even know, and that's okay.
And faith doesn't mean there's inaction. It's on the other hand, faith,
Right.
You also have a lot of action that takes place. You're not
Yes.
sitting back and saying, okay,
Just
well,
hope this happens.
yeah, hope this happens and God make this into being.
Right. That is a good point, because some people think that. And it's like, well, that's not what I'm talking about.
That's not what you're talking about. That there is the steps and the actions and the work that comes into play. There are risks. There's no guarantees on it, even with that faith component that comes into play. Resiliency, you brought that up, and I mean just societally, and as a woman in particular, to speak to women entrepreneurs differently than maybe men. What have you observed? What have you witnessed? How have you seen the differences? What are the different challenges that are there for women listeners, maybe than male listeners?
Wow, great question. I would say on this area, I'm so convicted about this because I find that my concern for some of the younger generation that I've seen, that I see coming up and are entrepreneurial, they don't all have this innate resiliency of determination per se. Some do. It's not an overall overarching like umbrella to everyone. But what I'm saying is I see an unfortunate trend that sometimes too much, some young people, when something gets hard, it gets tough for whatever reason, maybe they weren't brought up that way, or I don't know, maybe they were and they're just making these decisions. But when times get tough, they think that it's not their calling, or they just give up or try something else that's easier. But the problem is we weren't created to just have an easy life, and nothing great comes out of easy. What comes great is like forging that sword when you're, when you talk about making a sword and it's under fire and it's refining this whole process. That's a painful process. Even for us lady entrepreneurs, I usually talk about it as pruning. I was in a Bible study with ladies one time, and this was such a core concept for me where it said, look, we go through pains in our life sometimes, but you have to think of it as, the Lord may be the gardener and you're the flower. And you should be celebrating that you're being pruned, which is painful, but you're being pruned because a gardener only prunes flowers that they see the most hope in and opportunity, and that they're going to be the most beautiful flowers. They prune them. And so I would say to entrepreneurs today is, number one, let's make sure we're teaching our younger generation and encouraging this younger group of entrepreneurs coming up that when it gets hard, the situation or life or business, that's a time to push through. That's a time where I tell people, like, when you are really up against a wall, it's because you're about to have a breakthrough. Right. You're about to have a breakthrough. You're at the cusp. So if you give up, you'll never see what that will be. But just know that, celebrate it when you have a hard time, because that means you're about to have a breakthrough, which means your breakthrough is going to positively, most likely, impact others. Right. And that is so important. So make sure that you're determined. Make sure you're resilient in bouncing back, trying to be agile and flexible, knowing that there are many ways to create an outcome. It may not be the way you thought it was, but look at the outcome and can other people brainstorm with you to create that outcome a different way? Because the fact that you have these goals and dreams means they're there for a reason, and that you're there to serve people for a reason. And if you're not willing to take it to that like ninth inning or past that and go into overtime, and you're not willing to push through to get the result that that needs to happen, what if it's on you right now? It's your job to do that. And if you give up, where will that leave other people? And so I really want entrepreneurs, but especially women, number one, know that your calling is important. Know that your voice is important. Your thoughts and ideas are important. Women are typically very good on creativity. And so I always want to tell women entrepreneurs too, like, let yourself be creative. Let yourself brainstorm and think of all the crazy ideas you have. And if they seem totally nuts, write them all down and just try them. Because part of the fun of being entrepreneurial is trying different things and seeing what works. It is not a science. It literally is an art. And you can't hold yourself back from that. So try all the things. Try all of it. See what works. See what lights you up. See what lights other people up. And there's something to that. So I find that women weren't always brought up to be bold. Now, I've always been bold, so that has never been a problem. But my girls will even tell me that, right, Mom? You were very bold. I don't know where that comes from, right? Your confidence, okay. But I want I want that charismatic boldness. I want that to encourage others. I want that people to see the possibilities of what they can do. And I really want women entrepreneurs to know their voice matters, their thoughts matter. And sometimes I find in a setting of business, sometimes it could be a bunch of men and maybe one or two women. And the men do a lot of the talking and the women don't always do the talking. And so I encourage women, like, your ideas matter. You need to engage. You need to be assertive. You need to share, because sometimes our thought processes are different than the way guys' thought processes are. Now, they have great ideas too, but we may have different kind of great ideas that if we're not sharing, we're holding back the possibilities.
Right.
And so I guess that was what I would share with entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs is go after it with gusto, be bold, be assertive, have a voice, know that having a voice teaches others how to have a voice. Yeah. And amazing things have happened in our world because women have stepped up and had a voice.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And with twin 31-year-old daughters at this point in time, living in different parts of the world that are very bold, there's probably nothing more proud as a parent. And there's a long list of things I'm proud of for them. But both my daughters are independent. They can travel the world. They do. They can find themselves in different, being global citizens and how they approach what they do. One, couldn't be any more proud of them. But two, that boldness that they demonstrate in terms of how they look at the world and how they're approaching the world is fantastic. So love you girls. So I'll put that in for a second, right?
Love our girls.
But then I come back in if we talk about capitalism, there's all kinds of things. We're going to have to wrap it up here in a second. So I could be launching another episode for us.
Yeah.
Over the next decade, women are going to control more wealth than men. When we think about that, being bold and having a voice, and a friend of mine, Amy Hart Klein, and her co-author Dennis Jaffe on the book, Finding Her Voice, Leaving Her Legacy. Why? Because traditionally, whatever that means, right? Traditionally, women haven't been raised in that role, and men have controlled more wealth to date than women have. But that is changing, and that's going to change for a myriad of different reasons. Because of professionalism in the workplace, because of, inheritance, because of entrepreneurism that you just spoke to. But the individuals are going to be controlling that wealth, no matter what their background was. The controlling of that wealth is an entrepreneurial journey into itself. Yeah. Individuals are going to have to be bold. They can't just relinquish investment management decisions, tax decisions, legal decisions to the professionals that are around them. And the individuals that we serve. I love it when, if it's still couples, the couples are involved together, because it's better for them and their family of what they're trying to achieve. But also bringing in that boldness, especially if you end up with a woman that may not be leading. And we have plenty of women that lead in the family versus the man. So it's absolutely not a defining, pigeonholing, stereotyping type item, but for individuals to be emboldened and engaged in these conversations, because whether it's like you and starting your business and what that meant for your family and the journey that you're on with that, and taking that leadership role, when it comes to the wealth management topic, it's absolutely a topic that everyone has to be engaged in when it comes to enterprising families that have realized levels of wealth. So I'm going to give you the closing thoughts and comments for listeners here, points of encouragement, whatever it may be. But I've so enjoyed this conversation, but I'll let you have the final word.
Oh, well, thank you for having me here today. It's been wonderful. And of course, you and I, we always joke we can probably talk forever. And so it's our challenge is to reel it in for the session, right? But I would say for the last words of wisdom, I would just say is, I think we all just need to take a personal responsibility to, number one, dream, because I feel like in our life, as things don't go the way we want them to in life and or in business, we sometimes some people can feel like, well, that's just the way it's supposed to be. Maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. I want to be here to encourage you. That is not the way it's supposed to be. So I want to encourage you to dream again. I want you to dream about anything you want in your life, business and personally. Set those goals, know your why. And I think that for the takeaway too, I want you to know that number one, you're worth everything that you want to be. You're worth it to go after it. Your children are worth it. Your spouse is worth it. And to live out, if we all lived out our purpose that we have, we will make a much bigger impact in the world. We will have a much bigger voice in the world. And just can imagine that when we do that, and for all the listeners that are listening to this, know that we have a responsibility to show by leading by example to the younger generation what can be.
Yeah.
What can be. That's our responsibility. I'll leave it on that.
And we will leave it on that. So thank you for listening again. If you want to continue the conversation, please send us an email at clearconversations@ccpwealth.com. Thank you and have a blessed day.